Hello students, we are now getting to the interesting parts where we are almost culminating on our foundations so that we can get to building interesting things. So according to my curriculum, we have only two things to go before we start building interesting stuff. The functions, which I'm introducing today, and then we'll talk about modules next time. And then we can now go into building interesting things, games and anything that you've been dreaming about, okay? And those are just the actual building blocks of any program that you can come across. So let's talk about functions today. So I'll create a file here called functions, intro or functions1, intro.py, okay? So what are functions? Functions, we've already been seeing functions so far. We've looked at print, you've seen print functions, you've seen int where you're converting stuff to integer, you've seen float function, you've seen str for converting to a string, okay? And many others. Even range, I remember we looked at range, okay? All these are functions. And functions, you'll see them in this kind of format. You see the name of the function and then a bracket. So the bracket means the bracket here takes in input inside this bracket, what we call arguments, okay, or parameters. Don't worry about the naming technicalities, but just call them either arguments or parameters, okay. So those are what it takes in and gets back something. So a function has an input and an output. Gets in something, does some work on it, and then returns. Or it could not return, it could just do some action also. It doesn't have to return. But when it returns something, that's like an output. Okay, so input, output. So that's a function. So and normally, we've been using functions that have already been built by someone else. They're called inbuilt functions. They've already been built in the program. They come with Python already, like we talked about Python having batteries included. So these are the batteries of Python, the ones that come with Python. But now you have a chance to build your own functions that you can call and do stuff with it, okay? So to define your own function, actually the word is define. It's called def, short for define. And then you have the name of the function here. The function, I just said the name of the func. You'll see a lot of and then here you list of parameters of params or parameters, okay, and then a colon. You've seen this colon so far many times, okay. The colon always, when you start with the colon, it goes into a new tab, okay. You have to tab in. Press tab or 4 spaces or 2 spaces depending on your format. So, and here that's where you put your body of the function, okay, and it can be multiple lines, etc. Okay, all this in a tab before, and then to end the function you just need to get out of that tab or that indent, and then you're good. You finished your function and you can continue with do the rest of the stuff here outside the function. So let's look at the simplest function that you can do. A function that does nothing. It totally does nothing. So you can have a function, so def do nothing, okay. Does not take in anything. You say do nothing. So bracket taking nothing, and then you just type your pass. It totally does nothing. Just pass. Okay. And then how do you call a function? You just call it by that function do nothing, and then you call it that way. Give it, if it doesn't take input, don't give it any input. Okay. So that's a function that if I run here, it will totally do nothing. Okay, so you can see that there's nothing that really happened here. Okay, so what if, let's do a function that at least does something. Let's talk about a function that adds up two numbers. So let's say add 2, call it add 2. So def add 2. So takes in number, the first number, let's call it x, second number y, okay, colon. So all it does is to add those two numbers. So just say return x plus y. It's equals just one line. Just call it return x plus y. So let's call that function now. So we've defined and now calling. So there's defining and calling. So calling here we do add. So we need, but you need to, it will get us an output. So we can print that output. So we can say print, okay, then print add 2 20 with 30. Okay, if you add those two, you should get 50. So let's see if it prints 50. So you see 50 here because it just adds 2 and this. I guess I'll tell you about, if this is confusing you a lot, you can always separate this out into, like, call it maybe something like summation. Well, let me call it sum1. Sum is already a defined, it's already a function, so don't be using sum as a variable. So sum1 equals to add 2, and add now 40 plus 56, and now I can print sum1. Okay, if you run that, you should see this 96. Okay, so that is the simplest functions that we can see, but we can go into more complex examples, but that's just the gist of it when you talk about functions. Okay, so in the next session we'll look at more other interesting examples of functions, and then we'll close that. Okay, so see you there.